Alrighty, so we're very, very close here. What I'm going to do this now is start to actually implement the core game logic. So far, the only thing that's missing is the actual game part of the whole game. And the way that I'm going to do it is there's going to be three sort of layers that we're going to implement, and I'm going to implement each layer completely before going down to the next layer. The first layer, obviously, is going to be our handlers. So we do need to write our handlers. We need to handle the different requests that can come in. And then the handlers are then going to defer off onto things like the player class or the game class. Those are the two other layers that we'll have to implement. So we'll implement all of our handlers. We will implement all of our player methods on our player, and then we'll implement the game itself. So I'm not going to do this in steps, so we won't be able to test much until we're a little bit further along. But I just, we've already seen how to build the application with React. We've talked about the architecture. We've implemented all of the architecture and all the cross-cutting concerns. Now it's just a straight shot to the finish line. So let's go ahead and start off with implementing our game start handler. So in my game handlers, I'm going to add another on request for a.game_start. And he's simply going to say const validator equals game.start, and then client.respond action validator. Then we'll go ahead and do client on request a.game_select_card. For game select card, I am going to add a check here. I'm going to say if not this dot player, then client.fail action, you are not in this game, and then return. And then client.respond action followed by this dot player dot select card action card ID. Actually, I'm going to change the way I implement this game start. I can just pass in game start directly into client respond without an intermediate validator class. So I'm just going to do that. It's the same logic, it's just a little cleaner. Anyway, then the last request we have to handle is a.game_select_stack. Because really the only two things you can do in this game is select a card or select a stack if you're the czar. So then we'll do the same thing. I'll just copy and paste this action here. And then I'm simply going to say client.respond action this.player.select_stack action.stack_id. And that's it. Now, obviously, the select card and select stack methods are not created. Same with the game.start method. So let's go ahead and go to the next layer, and that is the player class. And so let's just go to the player class, and let's do a straight shot through this class and get it all implemented. Let's start off with my stack. My stack I'm going to set to this.game.round and this.stack, and then a ternary that will return this game round.getStackDetails. Details this.stack, and then true, or otherwise null. So if there's a round and we have a stack, meaning we're in this round, then invoke the getStackDetails method, but then pass in true. The true flag will force reveal it, even if the stacks are not revealed. Because this is our internal player representations, private. So then is czar, I'm going to say this.game.round question mark this.game.round.czar equals this, otherwise false. So if we have a round, then check to see if we are the czar, otherwise false. Is playing is simply going to be this.game.round question mark this game round is player playing this, otherwise false. For is winner, I simply do if this.game.round and this game.round.winning stack, then return this game round winning stack equals, or winning stack.player equals this, otherwise false. What I'm going to do here is, I'm actually going to take this.game.round and I'm going to alias it out at the top. I'm going to say const round equals this.game. So now I can remove all of this.game stuff, and that will shorten our code substantially for the in the horizontal screen space. I like keeping the horizontal screen space relatively low. All right, so next up, let's go ahead and scroll down so you can see what we did here. And remember, you can always look on the left-hand side to see what lines I've changed in this video. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down, and then I'm going to put in some, underneath add points, I'm going to put some event handlers in that'll be invoked by the game itself. So we'll do on game start. We're going to say this tick. We're going to set our score to 0, and then we're going to say this dot set hand size, hand size. We haven't written set hand size yet, but we will soon. Then on round start, we're going to say this tick, and then every time we start the round, the first thing we do is we say this dot stack equals this dot game dot round dot get stack by player ID, this dot ID, and then this set hand size, hand size. Then on round end, we're going to clear out our stack. So we're going to say this tick, this stack equals null. Then we're going to write an add cards method that'll say this tick, this hand push dot 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 cards. So we're going to push down all the cards that we received. Then we'll have set hand size, which will take an account. First we'll get the deck. I'll say const deck equals this dot game. If not deck, then return. Then if this hand length is smaller than count, then we want to draw cards. How do we draw cards? We simply say this dot add cards, and then pass in deck dot draw white cards, count minus this hand length. So like, let's say there's a play 3, and then the round ends. Well, when the next round starts, we want to make sure that we have 10 cards in our hand. So sometimes we might be adding 1 card, sometimes we might be adding 3. Then we'll do a remove card, card ID. We'll say if not this dot stack, return validator dot fail. You are not in this round. If we don't have a stack, then we can't remove the card. Or sorry, I meant select card, didn't I? So if we're not in the stack, then, or if we're not in the game, we cannot select a card. Then I'm going to say card index equals lodash find index, this hand, followed by ID of card ID. And if card index is -1, then return validator.fail, invalid card. Then const result equals this dot game add card to stack, passing in our hand at card index and our stack. Then I'm going to say if result did succeed, then we're going to remove that card from our hand by ticking on this hand splice card index of 1. And then finally return result. Now we just need to implement our select stack. So select stack will have a stack ID, and I'm going to say if not this game round or this game round czar does not equal this, if we're not currently the czar, then return validator.fail, you are not the czar. Otherwise, return this .game.select stack ID. And that's the entirety of our player. So I'm going to scroll through this file one more time. We have our imports, we create our class, we have our view, we have our summary, we have our constructor, and then we have a bunch of these just fancy little event handlers and other utility methods. Then we have our select card and our select stack where the majority of the game logic is actually taking place. And then we have our dispose. So now let's start with the game. Let's come up to the game. We're pretty much done with the view and the summary and the is disposed. For the constructor, we're done with that. So we're done with the add player, send message, set options. So let's start off after set options. We want to say start. On game start, we're going to say this ensures active, then const validator equals new validator. Then I'm going to say validator.assert this step equals a step setup. And then if that's false, we'll say game already started. Then we'll validator assert on this players.length is greater or equal to minimum players, otherwise too few players. And then we'll validator.assert this game options sets length is greater than 0, and say, please select a set. So if they tried to start the game without selecting any sets, then we'll throw an error. Then I'm going to say, if validator did fail, return validator. Otherwise, we're going to tick, and we're going to tick on starting the game. To start the game, we're going to say this.deck equals this.app.cards. Remember our card database? .generate decks, passing in our this.options.sets. So that will generate our black decks and our white decks, or black deck and our white deck. Then I'm going to let all the players know that we started. So for let player of this.players, player.onGameStart. You know, I'm thinking I could have actually used the dispatcher for that instead of... whatever, it doesn't matter. Then I'm going to say this underscore next round, and then I'm going to return validator. All right, so now we have to do our add card to stack and select stack methods. So take one last look at the start method. Add card to stack, card followed by stack or stack ID. I'm going to say this dot ensure active. If this dot step does not equal a step choose whites, then return validator dot fail. That's not how you spell fail. You can't do that now. Then I'm going to say if this dot round is stack finished, stack or stack ID, return validator dot fail. The stack is already finished. Then, if we get this far, then we enter a tick, and we simply say this dot round dot add card to stack, card stack or stack ID, and then we end with return validator dot succeed. Next up, we'll do our select stack. So select stack will have stack or stack ID, and this is for when the czar selects a winning stack. And we'll say this ensure active. If this dot step does not equal a step judge stacks, then return validator fail. You can't do that now. Otherwise, simply tick, and the tick is just going to say this dot round dot select winner, stack or stack ID, and then we'll return validator dot succeed. All right, so now we have to implement our next round method. So the next round method is going to have a flag of was canceled. And the was canceled flag is going to determine if the round ended because the round was canceled. Like, let's say the czar left, for example. So I'm going to say this dot ensure active, because if the czar leaves, we don't want to discard those cards in the stacks. We want to return all the cards in the stacks to their respective players. Then I'm going to say if this dot round, if we had a previous round going and we were canceled, then for let stack of this round stack list, stack.player.add cards, stack.card. So go ahead and if it was canceled, give all the players back their cards. Otherwise, for let stack of this round stack list, we want to say this.deck discard white cards, stack.card. So if the round ended normally, take all the cards in the stacks and put them back in the deck. Then we need to figure out the next czar ID. So I'm going to say const czar equals, if we have a field called next czar index, I'm going to say this dot players at this underscore next czar index modulus this dot players dot length, just to ensure that the number is between 0 and the maximum player length. Otherwise, I'm going to start off with the first player. Then I'm going to remove this next czar index from the class. Then we got to instantiate the round, which I don't think we've imported the round yet, so let's scroll up to the top. And let's simply import round from round. Now we can scroll down and say on next round, we can say this dot round equals new round, this deck, draw black card, czar, and this players. And then we'll say this step equals a step choose whites, The final thing we have to do is notify all the players that the round is starting. So we can say for let player of this dot players player dot on round start. And with that, we should be ready to be able to test it. So I'm going to scroll through the code that we've changed so you guys can take one last look at it. We should be able to test at least selecting a card and getting a hand, although we won't be able to test transitioning on the steps. So once we finish a round or once we select all the white cards, it's not going to transition yet to the next step, but that's fine. At the very least, we'll be able to test what we got so far. So I'm going to click on Leave Game, I'm going to log in, and I'm going to create a game, and we see that we have all of our awesome sets. And then I can hit Start Game, and I got a connection disconnected, which means that there was a error in the game. So it says, validator cert, this blah blah blah, can't read options of undefined. Oops. You guys probably already caught that before I did. But it's not this game options, it's simply this options. So make sure that you fix that. Coming back, we shouldn't even have to refresh. We should just be able to come in and then create a game. Oh, we will have to because I don't. It never received a success notification that the game wasn't started or a failure, but whatever. Let's create the game. Let's hit Start Game, and right now it's saying too few players, which is good. So let me go ahead and duplicate this tab and log in as a different player, and then hit Start Game. And now we see that the czar is here. Our other players playing. We have our hand up here, as you can see, but it's not expanded by default because we're the czar. On the other screen, it is expanded by default because it wants us to choose a card. So let's go ahead and choose a card. And by choosing a card, notice that the card got played, our hand disappeared, and then on the other screen, we see that the card is not revealed, but it was indeed played. So that's fantastic. Now, really, the only thing... Oh, you'll also notice that the playing status was removed. So now, really, the only thing left to do is to write the transition between the different steps. And I'm going to do that in the next video. So yeah, we'll see you guys then.